I think that's going to do it for collect technical data. There is one other thing I wanted to touch on in missions in general, and that is the difference between a mission and an environment. So with the WizKids Open stuff that we looked at last week, I mean, we got the new sector condition cards. And those are things I would consider environments as opposed to missions. Like all of these had very specific, you know, one side versus the other side. And
or would let me guess, you consider like the Mutara Nebula another
an
environment?
environment for the most part, yeah. Because it's something that affects both sides equally for the most part. And it just changes some of the basic rules of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas mostly with missions, it changes the objective of the game, not the way you play the game for the most part. So my favorite one to look to for this one is one that came out of the Klingon Koraga, and that's the Patrol the Badlands. Now the mission is a thing where it's like 1 versus 2, and you have to get to the other side of the board and survive around. But the big thing is where it's played. The Badlands scenario, I think, is some of the coolest uses for objects on the playing field that I've seen. So there's two different things here. Number one is the gravitational anomaly. With the gravitational anomaly, you put a planet token in the center of the board, and it's an anomaly. So it's not actually a planet. But when you are within range 1 to 2 of it, you are considered in its gravitational pull. So if a ship begins the round in the gravitational pull and ends it farther from the pull based on a range rule. So if you start at range 2 of this planet and then move out to range 3 or further, you get a power token regardless of what maneuver you did.
Hmm.
If you move into the gravitational pull or move closer, so if you're in range 2 of it and you move into range 1, then you remove an auxiliary power token because it's easier to use a planet's gravity or a gravity well than to escape a gravity well.
Hmm.
And most of all, if the auxiliary power tokens are added or removed in addition, they are added or removed in addition to whatever you did for your maneuver. So if you did a red maneuver moving away from the planet, you'd have 2 auxiliary power tokens here. If you had 2 auxiliary power tokens and moved toward the planet with a green maneuver, you lose 2 auxiliary power tokens. And it's really cool because you can do a red maneuver into the planet, you get 1 and immediately lose 1.
Neat.
So I think this is like one of the just one of the neatest little maneuvering add-ons that I've seen, and it's really simple. Well, maybe not really simple, but it's pretty darn simple that I think. What do you guys think about just the gravitational anomaly? David?
I like it. I think that it makes you think a little bit more about your maneuvering, which is sometimes an aspect of this game that's lacking. Not always. But yeah, I think all things being equal, the auxiliary power token is probably a good way of representing that the planet effect.
Mm-hmm.
This, to me, is a great way to play with a planet token that doesn't favor the board.
Yes, because it's not actually a planet token. You can move through it. You can shoot through it.
Well,
oh well, I guess technically you treat it as a planet, but you can change that a little.
No. What I'm saying is the advantage a Borg has with a planet token, and we're going to see a lot of this at the regionals, is their ability to just go around it at will. But in order to do that, they have to stay fairly close to it.
Oh, that's a good point.
And so this would mess with a lot of their maneuvers because one thing Borg have a lot of trouble with is removing auxiliary power tokens.
Because they can only do it by going in one direction.
Right.
Which is pretty cool. And the other thing I like about this a lot, like the next closest one to this is like the Escape the Gas Giant planet. But this one doesn't actually do damage. It's not giving you such a huge penalty that you're just going to avoid the darn thing altogether.
Well, the other thing from this scenario does do damage to you, though.
Yes, and I like that too. That's the plasma storms. So the plasma storms are obstacles. You cannot attack through them. They're they're almost like mini planets in that kind of fashion. But the size of them is so small. Like Here's the. Do I have a mine token? Do it like here's. This is about the size of mine token. This is the size of your plasma storm. All right, and they're really nice to maneuver around, and you can fit a lot of them on there. So this is one of the few things that really puts a much higher demand on maneuvering skill. Because during the activation phase, if your ship or a maneuver template, including a sensor echo, overlaps one or more plasma storm tokens, you suffer 1 damage token for each plasma storm. Also, you cannot shoot, and also you cannot shoot through them. So, even though they look really small, they can have a huge effect if you can manage to like park one right near the corner of your ship, and then you can the lines that you can trace for line of fire get severely reduced. And I think it's a little bit not quite as dramatic since because of their size, that like unlike the planet token where you can just hide behind and go back and forth with the Borg, you can actually have a closer maneuvering matchup with these things, and you still have to be careful not to run into them. Like I think it'd be a little bit closer to the way, kind of like the way X-Wing does its what's it called, the
asteroids.
Yeah, because in X-Wing you can't shoot when you hit an obstacle, and in Attack Wing you can.
Right. Yeah.
And I think this is a really cool, another really cool just environmental set. You know, it affects both people equally. It changes the rules of the game in a very simple way, but it does reward maneuvering differently. Just like the gravitational anomaly. So what do you guys think? As I sat here and rambled.
I think that environments in general are interesting. The gravitational anomaly, as I said, I like it as a planet token that doesn't outright hand the game to the Borg. I also like it, honestly. I have the Koraga, but I've never looked at this mission because, frankly, it's 6 cards long, and I was like, ain't no one got time for that. But I'm looking at this and I'm saying to myself, you know, this is actually interesting because it actually, gravitational anomaly aside, this actually does a fairly good job of simulating a planet's gravity, which is something that Star Trek in general, it doesn't talk a lot about, but one of the sort of things that everybody forgets because it almost never comes up is it's actually fairly difficult to go to warp inside a planet's gravitational well. And then, of course, in Attack Wing, modern warp drive is basically expressed as the ability to go 4 straight or more. So it's interesting to me in that this actually does a fairly good job of simulating that aspect of the Star Trek universe if you just assume that instead of a gravitational anomaly, it's just a planet with gravity.
David, any thoughts? Not really. I haven't messed around too much with the plasma storms. But I'm with you. Things that change the environment give players extra things to consider. And that typically leads to changes in how you build things, what's super good, what's okay. Variety's nice to have.
And the nice thing is with all environments, like you can use them to spice up even just a basic game. Like whatever your mission is, you can take that mission and throw it into the Badlands. Like if you are scanning the battleship, all of a sudden the battleship wandered into the Badlands, you've changed the way the scenario runs.
Yeah, but that would just make it horribly unfair for the battleship.
Probably.
but I mean,
you get what I'm saying.
You could destroy the outpost. The bad. You know what I like about that? It makes it harder to do like the 1-turn win in Rendezvous.
It's hard. It's hard. You have to either go around the planet or avoid the plasma storm tokens that someone laid out, or things like that.
Yeah.
And you can, of course, you can even take just one part or the other. The plasma storms are its specific thing. The gravitational anomaly is a specific thing. You could throw these in with a meteor shower from the sector conditions. Things like that. I think it's pretty cool. But yeah, the difference between missions and just environments, and I like it. I like environments, and I think there's a lot of different combinations of the two that you can put together and have, like, not even just an interesting game. I mean, you could even make an interesting event for people who want a tournament that's not quite as cutthroat as some of the OPs are.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool.